Globally speaking, I think the difference is the passion with which I approach social studies. It was not so much just learning from a book and learning history, but it came to life. Hands down, this is the best workshop I have ever taken. It's not even a workshop. I can't stress enough that for me it wasn't a workshop so much as it was a life experience. I've said that, well, first of all, I think that every social studies teacher should take this class. You shouldn't teach social studies without having experienced this class. But more than that, moving on to the general population, I know it sounds silly, but I wish that there was a way that every global citizen would have to take this class to experience the world through the eyes of other people. I think sometimes as Westerners, we tend to have blinders on as to the wonderful things that go on in the other side of the world and our legacies from different places in the world. And this class really opened up my eyes to that. One of the things that stands out is when I taught about India and Hinduism, we talked about the Akhbar and Birbal stories, and that brought it to life. My students loved those stories. They felt like they knew these people. So we talked about a relationship between a Muslim leader and a Hindu advisor in the cleverness of the two people, of Akhbar especially, or Birbal rather. That was one of the things I did differently, is bring stories into it, artwork, things like that, of the different gods, that kind of thing.
She tried to make it interesting and not just boring kind of thing, just looking at a page and learning about it like other teachers would do, because I've talked to a couple of my friends and all they do is just look at a book.
She always had a movie. And
the students were excited about the different things other than textbook things, like the stories and the artwork, and whenever I could get music and things like that.
So the movies, games, that I know a couple people that were in our class last year, and they said that they didn't do it at all.
Other classes, I would say, was kind of more dull and boring, because all you would do was just look in the textbook, do your homework that night, or a worksheet, and then hand it in the next morning. We would do activities, games, and such for just reasons, and we would actually have fun with it and make it more understandable and more comprehensible for the students.
Miss Pappas, because she went to the Minerva classes, she learned all these different things and tried to make it more interesting than past years that she's done.
One of the things that's important to me is learning about what kinds of things people from other cultures are sensitive to, what kinds of things they might consider offensive, so as to educate my students to not repeat those kinds of things. And some of them are pronunciations, like for Islam or Muslim. We talked about Muslim is just not an acceptable kind of pronunciation, or not a desirable one.
People say that say Muslim a lot, and Muslim means like an evil person. So they would like us to pronounce it Muslim, because that means like holy, listening to your God and stuff.
We talked about how for Jewish people, you should not refer to it as the Old Testament, because that's offensive to them, because it implies that it's no longer valid or whatever. And we talked about it being the Hebrew Bible. Those kinds of things, really, just trying to be more sensitive to other people's cultures and feelings.
Jewish people don't like their testament to be called the Old Testament, because they just have one. They're waiting for the Messiah to come, but Christianity believed that Jesus was the Messiah.
To the Jews, they don't like their Old Testament to be called the Old Testament, because to them they don't have another Bible or Testament, so they don't like it to be called the Old Testament. But in Christianity, they have an Old and a New, because they have two sections of the Bible.
Jewish just has one testament, and Christianity has two.
So
say like when we're talking to each other or something like that, I'm not going to talk about the Old Testament. I'm just going to be talking about like the Testament.
I fell in love with the Akbar and Birbal
She
stories.
would mention that quite frankly, and she would say, when I was taking the Minerva session, they would talk about how Akbar and Birbal would do these funny things, and I just wanted to check it out. So she took the book out and showed us, and we kind of actually enjoyed it. And it was a surprise to me that I would enjoy something from different cultures I never even heard of.
I was interested in those because those are actually kind of funny because it's kind of modern day.
Another big thing was that talking about how you find these ancient Greek philosophers and average day stuff, it really helps you relate. Like, if I would have heard that in anywhere about a Greek philosopher, I would have been like, who's Aristotle, or who's Plato, or who's anyone that I learned about. And it really, really helps you relate to the normal average world today.
Another thing that stands out is the different representations of the different gods in like the Buddha, and whether it's in Japan or in China or in India, and how he's presented differently. And with my students, we made the analogy of the Christian St. Nicholas or Santa Claus, and how he's presented differently in different cultures.
The biggest thing we learned is that every religion has a similarity. Another biggest thing we learned was that every culture, it doesn't have to have the same God. Some may have many different gods, and others may have just one single God, and sometimes it's the same God but just a different name. When you think of religion, you think different languages and different looks and different dress codes and everything. But if you think of it, those are really just minor differences. They're really more alike than anything you could imagine. Like, just because they have a different way to dress or a different language doesn't mean they are different. They have many similar ways of religion.